Hello, today we're going to talk about the Restoration, the Liberalism and Nationalism, and what happened in Europe in the 19th century. After Napoleon was exiled to the island of Santa Helena, the European monarchies held the Congress of Vienna in 1814-1815 to agree on the future of Europe. The important decisions were taken by the four great powers that defeated Napoleon: Russia, Prussia, Austria, and Britain. Their priorities were to prevent revolutions against hereditary monarchs and avoid future wars. The main principles of the treaty that they signed at the end of the Congress were: legitimacy. Monarchs overthrown by Napoleon were considered the legitimate rulers of their countries, so they were restored to power. Balance of powers. No single country should be so powerful that it could dominate Europe. Compensation. The countries that had fought Napoleon were rewarded with land taken from smaller countries. Conservative. The authority, the order, the hierarchy, Catholic religion, and legitimists of absolute monarchies. And the metinist system, that is, the intervention is based on the intervention or solidarity among the states. What happened is that they changed the borders all over Europe. For example, the victorious countries, for example, Russia gained most of Poland, and in 1813 they annexed all of it. It also gained Finland from Sweden. Prussia became much bigger, which made it a rival to Austria as the most powerful German state. Austria gained territory in what is now Italy, the north, the Lombardy Venetia, but it lost the Austrian Netherlands, and they also gained part of Poland, Galicia. Great Britain gained overseas colonies, as for example Malta, the Cape Colony, and Ceylon, and also gained the control over the North Sea and Baltic Sea, as they much worried in preserving or controlling the trade routes. The stronger, not neutral buffer states are going to be created around France to control it, for example, Netherlands or Switzerland. The Bourbon monarchies were restored in France and Spain and the Kingdom of the Two Sicilies. These are the most important changes during the Congress after the Congress of Vienna. The ideologies that are going to be after all these revolutions that happened in the 19th century, after the revolution and after the restoration, are going to be the liberalism, nationalism, and the evolution to the democracy. This is just as a reminder of what we studied in Unit 1. The liberalism, the ideology that started in the Enlightenment ideas of the 18th century, it's based on the ideas of John Locke, of Hume, Montesquieu, Voltaire, Rousseau, etc. The English philosopher John Locke is considered the father of liberalism. He believed that people should be free to live how they like, as long as they don't harm other people. According to him, all people are born with natural rights, including the right to protect their life, health, liberty, and possessions. All men are also fundamentally equal, so they should all help to choose their government. In the 19th century, most liberals came from the middle classes, the bourgeoisie. They wanted greater freedom and an end to the nobility's privilege. Liberals supported these policies. In the politics, popular sovereignty, separation of powers, and equality before the law. In economy, the free enterprise based on Adam Smith's ideas and free trade. And also other freedoms, like for example religion, speech, and freedom of the press. Most liberals supported the ideas that had led to the American and French revolutions, and saw the United States as an example that European countries should follow. In the 19th century, the liberal ideas are going to be divided in two parties, the moderate and the radical or progressive liberals. The moderate liberals support ideas as, for example, very limited male suffrage. You need to have a lot of property or money, so just the wealthy bourgeoisie can vote. The sovereignty was very limited because the monarch still have a lot of powers, for example, the legislative power. Freedom of speech and of the press, but with some prior censorship. The more radical or progressive liberals, they establish lower requirements for the limited suffrage. They establish national plenty, national sovereignty, and unrestricted freedom of speech of the press. The other ideology that is going to be the base of all these revolutions in the 19th century is the nationalism. In Europe today, most people feel that they belong to a nation, to a particular country and or group of people, which they care about and feel loyalty towards. This is usually the nations where they live, but it can also be where they grew up or where their parents came from. This feeling of belonging to a nation is their national identity. It is often based on a shared language and costumes, which make communication easy. Shared characteristics, the nation has typical kinds of behaviors and attitudes, for example, toward marriage, and geographical reasons. The nation occupies a particular area. At the start of the 19th century, most people didn't have a strong national identity. Their local area was more important to them than their nation. However, this identity gradually developed as a result of wars, invasions, and revolutions. This led people towards nation-states, countries for specific nations. In order to achieve this, they had to unify nations that were divided into many small states with different monarchs and governments, for example, Italy and Germany, or gained independence for nations that were ruled by another state or empire, for example, Greece and Belgium. This process was associated with nationalism, that is, a strong loyalty to a nation and pride in its achievements. Sometimes nationalism led people to believe that their nation was better or more important than other nations. Most liberals in the 19th century were also nationalism because they believed that their new nation states would be based on liberal principles. This is how we're going to start to have different revolutions, liberal revolutions, in three waves: 1820s, 30s, and 1848. In 1820s, the new ways of fighting are going to appear, for example, through secret societies. It was illegal to get together to conspire against the government, so that is why they're going to organize in secret societies. The leaders were militaries or high classes. The army is going to be a defender of the liberal ideas. In these revolutions, it's important the liberal triennium, el trienio liberal, in Spain. After Fernando VII returned to Spain, he didn't sign the Constitution of 1812, La Pepa, but he came back to the absolute regime, as in the rest of Europe, with the period we know as the Sexenio Absolutista, absolutist sexennium. 6 years where the liberals tried to change the government, creating different pronunciamientos. These pronunciamientos were revolutions led by the militaries that tried to change the Fernando VII's mind. None of them have succeeded except for this one. General Riego starts a liberal rebellion. He gains the support of the army and forces Fernando to accept the Constitution of 1812. This creates a constitutional monarchy. The reforms of the Cardiff Parliament are brought back, and, for example, they raise money through les amortizaciones, etc. But what is going to happen is that at the end, although Fernando pretends to accept the constitutional monarchy, secretly he asks the Holy Alliance that get together in the different congresses for help. France sends an army that is called Los 100,000 hijos de San Luis, 100,000 sons of San Luis, that ends with the liberal monarchy and establishes again the last decade, the ominous decade, la década ominosa, of Fernando VII. Here, so in the example of Spain, we can see how the liberal Revolution started by military established in the country for 3 years with the Constitution of 1812 with many liberal principles, and it ends with the Metternich system, that solidarity system created with the Congress of Vienna and the Restoration. Another example during this period is going to be the independence of Greece. The independence of Greece is because they belong to the Ottoman Empire. Just a little bit of history, okay? After the fall of the Byzantine Empire in 1453, Greece became part of the Ottoman Empire. In the Ottoman Empire, Christians and Jews had fewer rights than Muslims, so many Greeks decided to emigrate to Western Europe. Those who remained in Greece generally disliked the Ottoman rule, and there were numerous revolts. However, it was only in the 19th century that Greece gained independence. In the 18th century, many young Greek men studied at university in other European countries, where they learned about the Enlightenment. They started to believe that they needed a Greek nation state in order to introduce liberal reforms. Meanwhile, schools and libraries were founded in Greece. This taught the Greek people about their history and culture. This helped to create a national identity based on being Orthodox Christians and the descendants of the ancient Greeks. This period is called the Greek Enlightenment, and it led to the greater nationalism amongst Greek people. In 1821, Greek nationalists rebelled against the Ottomans. The Ottomans soon defeated most of the rebels and executed the Patriarch of Constantinople. However, in the Peloponnesus, the Greeks resisted, and the war continued for several years. In 1827, Britain, France, and Russia started helping the Greeks, and the Ottomans were defeated. In 1832, the Ottomans accepted Greek independence, and Prince Otto of Bavaria was made king of Greece. Although the Greek people now had their own state, independence created new problems. For example, only 1/3 of the Greek people in the Ottoman Empire lived inside the Greek state. The Greeks who still lived in the empire were now treated as traitors by the Ottomans. Greece hoped to expand its borders so that all Greeks would live in Greece. It also wanted to make Constantinople its capital. This led to several wars between Greece and the Ottoman Empire, but at least they gained the independence. Other example is the achieved all liberal constitution in several territories, like for example the Piemonte and Sardinia, that were one of Italian states, and Portugal, and also all the Latin American independence. At the start of the 19th century, Spain ruled most of Latin America since the 15th century. However, the criollos were particularly unhappy with the Spanish rule. The American Revolution in the north, the independence of the United States, and the spread of the Enlightenment ideas also inspired liberals to dream of establishing democratic republics, independent from the mother country. The Napoleonic Wars caused two important changes. For example, after the Battle of Trafalgar, the Spanish Navy was unable to protect their colonies, so therefore formed militias to protect themselves. And the colonies refused to accept José I Bonaparte as King of Spain and formed juntas to govern themselves. Some people wanted the juntas to be loyal to Fernando VII or the Cádiz Cortes, while others wanted complete independence. These disagreements led to various rebellions and civil wars in the colonies. There was no Spanish army in the colonies to stop these rebellions. Fernando VII and its restoration of the absolute monarchy in Spain increased the support for independence and led to different rebellions, led by soldiers like, for example, Simón Bolívar and José de San Martín. This continued during several years, as you can see there, the different dates of the independence, of the rebellions, but by 1829, except Cuba and Puerto Rico, the rest of the colonies were independent. The independence created new problems. The criollos, who had led the struggle for independence, wanted to control the independent states, which led to conflicts with other groups that also wanted to be the protagonists. Liberal and conservatives had very different political visions of the new states. These social and political divisions led to civil wars and wars between different states. The wars also made the military very powerful. Generals frequently took power in coups, supported by either liberals or conservatives. These generals are often called caudillos. Let's move on to 1830s revolutions. The main objective were to the creation of constitutional states and the national independence. What is more important is what happened in France. We're going to see what happened in France in a few pages. Let's move on to the independence of Belgium. It's another very important independence during this period. Belgium, it was after the Vienna Congress, has united Belgium into the Low Countries in that union, known as the Kingdom of the Netherlands. Belgium didn't have the same representation on the parliament. Also, the Dutch intervened on the Belgian Catholic Church. In education, they imposed the Dutch as the official language, etc. So at the end, they're going to revolt, achieving the independence as a constitutional monarchy. In the last revolution, 1848, is very important because it means the final defeat of the Restoration and the triumph of the liberal Balkan states. By the end of this century, all Europe except of Russia achieved liberal states. This revolution is more democratic and radical. Popular sovereignty and universal suffrage and some republics are going to be established. And also, it's for the first time a conflict that is going to be open through the second half of the 19th and the first half of the 20th century. That is the fight between the bourgeoisie and the proletariat or working class that are going to start fighting against each other. Again, this main example is France that we are going to see now. To conclude, at the end, the liberalism triumphed against the ancien regime, and all the feudalism with the feudal privilege of the nobles, clergy, were abolished, except in Russia, as I told. So we are going to focus on what happened in France since 1815 till 1848. There were numerous revolutions in France in the 19th century, as liberals and conservatives struggled for power. The most important revolutions are these ones. The first thing, after Napoleon was defeated, Louis XVIII, it was make the king. He restored the absolutism, but taking into account some of the characteristics of the revolution. So it was not too authoritarian. He proclaimed a charter, la Carta Otorgada or Statuto, where he granted some basic principles. For example, the executive power is held by the king, the legislative power is held by the two assemblies, the judicial power is held by independent judges. So, for example, we can see some of the division of powers. When he died, his successor, Charles X, Carlos X, succeeded his father after his death. He wanted to return to the old regime and put the Ordinance Decree. It suppresses the freedom of the press, modifies the electoral law, excluding the bourgeoisie, dissolves the Chamber of Deputies, and proposed new elections, repeal the electoral world, etc. Okay, so he's not going to recognize the Charter de la Carta Otorgada, and he's going to return to the old, to restore the absolute monarchy. People in Paris attacked the king's army and put up thousands of barricades to defend themselves. The army was unable to control the situation, and Charles X abdicated. The leaders of the revolution now created a constitutional monarchy with Louis Philippe d'Orléans as king. He was a liberal and initially he was popular. However, during his reign, the gap between the rich and poor grew, and poor people saw few improvements in their lives. In 1848, France was suffering from falling wages, rapid inflation, high unemployment. Violent protesters marched on the royal palace, and Louis Philippe was forced to escape to Britain. This created the French Second Republic. The revolution in France inspired people all over Europe to rebel against their monarchs. Many of these rebellions were nationalist, so together they are known as the Spring of Nations. This period, the 1848 revolution, is known as the Spring of Nations. However, in the end, almost all the rebellions were defeated by conservative governments. During this period, Louis Napoleon Bonaparte, the nephew and the heir of the Napoleon Bonaparte we know and that he was in Santa Elena, was elected president of this new republic. In 1851, he organized a coup d'etat, the same as his uncle did. And in 1852, he declared himself Emperor Napoleon III. He assumed full powers and ruled again as his uncle. He started what we know as the Second Empire. Napoleon III tried to modernize France. He encouraged free trade and built new railways and harbors. Trade grew rapidly, and the infrastructure projects created a construction boom. This reduced unemployment and produced strong economic growth. However, the boom came to an end in the late 1860s, which caused a serious financial crisis in France. In 1870s, Prussia provoked a war with France. We will see now when we study the unifications. With the help of the other German states, Prussia defeated the French army at the Battle of Sedan. Capturing Napoleon, France eventually surrendered and had to accept an humiliating peace treaty. France lost the regions of Alsace-Lorraine, Alsace-Lorraine, to Germany. France had to pay 5 billion gold francs to Germany in compensation for damage caused by the war. As a result of the defeat, Napoleon III lost power and was exiled to Britain. This created the French Third Republic. So let's move on to the German and Italian unifications. Germany and Italy are today two of the biggest states in the European Union. At the start of the 19th century, however, they didn't even exist. Let's look at Italy and Germany before the Napoleonic Wars. Germany, they were 100 of small. Let me see. Okay, Italy. Okay, let's focus on Italy. Okay, before this period was separated in seven states. Now we are going to move on. Okay. In the 19th century, people in Italy and Germany felt a growing sense of national identity. In both Italy and Germany, Napoleon, for example, introduced uniform laws, reduced the number of states, centralized the administration, so the different regions in each country became more similar to one another. Napoleon also took away the nobility's privilege, which gave the liberal bourgeoisie more power. The French invasions gave the people a common enemy, which made them cooperate with each other. Trade and travel increased due to strong economic growth and new railways, roads, and canals. People visited places outside their local area and saw how much they had in common with people in other regions. Romantic artists and writers glorified the culture and history of their nations. People started to feel proud of their cultural heritage and of their nationality. In Italy, as you can see here, okay, they were separated into 7 different states. In the north, the Kingdom of Lombardy-Venetia, that belongs to the Austrian Empire. The Kingdom of Sardinia-Cerdeña, the Piemonte-Cerdeña, that we've seen how in the different revolutions they achieved liberal constitutions. Then in the south, we have a huge kingdom, the Kingdom of the Two Sicilies. They were Bourbons, family with the Spaniards. The Papal States in the center, and then smallest Parma, Modena, Lucca, Toscana, the smallest republics. They're going to be like 2 options of how to unify, okay, before this, or around the king of Piemonte Cerdeña, that it was called Victor Emmanuel II, and his prime minister Cavour. that they were to expel the Austrians for the north, and expand the Sardinian territory. Okay, that was the most liberal kingdom in Italy. On the other hand, we have the liberal nationalists, like, for example, people like Mazzini or the Garibaldi, that encouraged people to rebel against the conservative regional rulers and nobles in order to create a democratic republic. Their rebellions were unsuccessful, so they decided to help, at the end, the kingdom of Piemonte-Cerdeña to take control of the other Italian states in order to unite Italy. Together, the two groups expelled the Austrians from Italy. As you can see, the different stages. Okay, they are going to first annex the kingdom of Lombardy after defeating Austria. In the south, Garibaldi is going to conquer the kingdom of the two Sicilies, and they are going to get together, one from the north and other for the south. Okay, in 1860, they're going to create the kingdom of Italy. After that, in 1860, they're going to defeat Austria again and took Venice and conquer the last with the proclamation of Rome as a new capital in 1870s with the Pontifical States. This marked the completion of the Italian unification. It took them so much to take the Pontifical States and Rome as a capital because they were defended by Napoleon III. Once Napoleon was defeated by the Prussians in Sedan, as I told you, they could go into the Pontifical States. So you have Garibaldi with the red shirts, the 1,000 red shirts that they were represented. Germany, after the Congress of Vienna, they were divided into 39 states, presided over by Austria. The two most powerful states in Germany were Prussia and Austria. Prussia, led by Wilhelm I and the Chancellor Otto von Bismarck, wanted a stronger and more united Germany, based on the German nationalism. Austria, on the other side, had a multinational empire that was mainly outside Germany, so it saw united Germany as a threat. It therefore preferred Germany to be weak and divided. In 1866, okay, you have some previous, okay, there were different liberals and nationalist ideas. They tried to get together into the Zollverein, that is the unification of costumes, las aduanas, okay. This is like an economic union, and different revolutions, etc. These are the leaders, Wilhelm I of Prussia and his Chancellor Bismarck, Otto von Bismarck, and the states. Prussia I is going to confront Austria and unify the northern state, the Duchy of Holstein and Swabia. Then they're going to defeat France and unify the southern state, incorporating Alsace-Lorraine from France. This was the beginning of the German Empire, or also called the Second Reich. These increased feelings of German nationalism in the other German states, which therefore joined the war against France. After France was defeated in 1871, Prussia established the German Empire with Wilhelm I of Prussia as its first emperor. The constitution of the new state established universal measure phrase, federal system formed by the states that had a level of self-governance. Germany became the strongest state in Europe and Bismarck the new leader in international relationships. With this, we will finish this huge unit. Thank you.